Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined today by Daniel Starkand. Daniel, a little bit of baseball news. So Dodger connection, Adrian Gonzalez retires from baseball a few days ago. Obviously, hasn't been in the major league since 2018, has been bouncing around. But I'm curious for you, Daniel, when you hear the news that Adrian Gonzalez retires, is there a memory? Is there some piece of his story that you recall immediately?
Well, let me just start off by saying that I thought Adrian Gonzalez retired a long time ago. So when this news came out, I was a little surprised. But I guess he was, he played in the World Baseball Classic and did some things. But as far as on the Dodgers, I feel like he had a lot of big moments. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is he homered in his very first at-bat with the team. I thought, that's always pretty cool. You never know, like when you acquire players to a big market like LA, you never know like what their immediate response is going to be. There's a lot of traveling involved, and sometimes guys start off slow with their new teams. But for him to come up first at bat and go deep, that was pretty cool. I remember I was at that game and the stadium was rocking. One other moment that came to mind is it was a game against the Phillies. I forgot what year it was, but the Dodgers hit 3 home runs in the 9th inning to tie it up. He didn't hit any of those, but he ended up having the walk-off. He went the other way for a little single to left field. That was just, I'd say, one of the most memorable games of this recent run of Dodgers success, and he ends up having the walk-off there. So those are the moments that stick out. But I feel like he was always the guy coming up with big hits. Like we know he was an RBI machine, great with, guys and runners in scoring position. So I feel like there's a ton of Agon moments to choose from.
Yeah, it's a fascinating career that Gonzalez had. I was looking at his stats. 5 All-Star appearances, 4 Gold Gloves, 2 Silver Sluggers, 3 top 7 MVP finishes. As a Dodger, between 2012 and 17, where 12 and 17 were both kind of partial seasons, he hits 101 home runs, 458 RBIs, hits 280, on base of 340, 450 slugging percentage, accumulating 9.2 wins above replacement. He was an above-average player in every single season except for his last one. And yet, for me, there's not a particular moment on the field. It's just what Adrian Gonzalez coming to the Dodgers represented. He was, of course, part of the massive trade. This was kind of the big splash that the Guggenheim Group did. As soon as they arrived to wash the Frank McCourt scent off of us, they acquired $250 million in salaries in one trade. Gonzalez, Josh Beckett, Carl Crawford, and Nick Punto. I was fun to look back at who we gave up. Ivan DeJesus Jr., Ruby De La Rosa, James Loney, Jerry Sands, and Alan Webster. Webster and De La Rosa, of course, were the 2 sort of prospects in that group. Neither of them amounted to anything. So this was a massive win for the Dodgers. But what that trade represented, I think, I don't want to overstate this. I think the Adrian Gonzalez trade is one of the biggest moments in Dodgers history. And I mean that because it represented a new era. You could argue that the Guggenheim Group buying the Dodgers was the real significant moment, but the Gonzalez trade kind of cemented it. It was the poster for who the Guggenheim Group would be. And take a look at this. From 2005 to 2012, so before Gonzalez came, he came for the last 30 games. The Dodgers weren't very good those 30 games, but including that season, they had one season over 90 wins from 05 to 2012. They won 2 divisional titles and made 3 playoff appearances. They were swept in the NLDS in 2006, and they lost 4-1 in the NLCS in 2008 and 2009. So basically, for an 8-year stretch, you're saying not competitive, only 190-win season, 2 divisional titles, and really no noise in the postseason. You make this trade, Guggenheim comes in. From 2013 to 2021, they have 90-plus wins in every season. They have 8 divisional titles in 9 years, of course, this last year being the exception where they had the second-best record in baseball. 9 playoff appearances in 9 years, 3 World Series appearances, 1 World Series title. So I don't think Adrian Gonzalez deserves all the credit for it, but I will never forget where I was when I heard about this trade because it was like the first ray of sunshine in what had been a very depressing stretch of Dodger baseball.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, I think a lot of people, we've become spoiled over the last decade or so just because the Dodgers are really good every year, win the division every year, obviously 90-plus wins. But like you said, prior to that, like from 2012 and before that, there wasn't a whole lot of success. So with, in the later McCourt years with the divorce and everything, it wasn't like the Dodgers were these big behemoth spenders. So I think you're right in the sense that trade kind of it began a new era with this new ownership group who said they were willing to spend the money, and then they went out and showed it. So I thought that was pretty cool. Obviously, outside of Gonzalez, like I don't think the Dodgers got a whole lot of Carl Crawford in that trade, who was also making a lot of money. Josh Beckett had the no-hitter, which was cool, but outside of that, it wasn't like he was some ace. So Gonzalez was the big piece of that package, and I'd say he came in and delivered. Like, no, he wasn't an MVP any year or anything, but he was, pretty much a perennial all-star, hitting in the middle of the Dodgers lineup for the next like 4 or 5 years or whatever it was. And he was a leader on that team, which was kind of a young up-and-coming team. Like, if you look at those years, the prospects the Dodgers had coming up, they had Yasiel Puig was the first one who Egon really became a mentor to him. Then you have Corey Seager, Cody Bellinger, Julio. All those guys were coming up when Egon was kind of the leader of that team, along with Clayton Kershaw, Justin Turner, all those guys. So I'm with you. I think that I don't want to overstate like what that trade meant, but I definitely thought that was kind of the beginning of a new era where it's like, hey, we're in a big market, we're in LA, and we're willing to spend the money to go out and get the players that are going to take us over the top. And I know Egon never won a ring with the Dodgers, but I think that 2020 championship, like a lot of the things that led up to that, he was heavily involved in.
Yeah, and you also have to mention as part of this story, I mean, he's a Mexican-born player, was playing for the Mexican national team in international competitions, and so the connection that he was able to foster with the Dodger community because of that is also significant. The last thing I'll say on Gonzalez...
I mean,
what's that?
That's still to this day too. He's still, very involved with the LA community and the Mexican American fans and so forth.
Yeah, the last thing I was thinking of is kind of how will Adrian Gonzalez be remembered? In my head, I guess I'll say I was surprised he only made 5 All-Star games. I mean, I just remember him with the Padres, what seemed to be a perennial All-Star player who was one of the better players in the league. Then he goes to the Red Sox, then he comes to the Dodgers, and he was productive in all of those places. Obviously, great defensively, above average, I would say, offensively, but I guess I'll say this, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I was surprised, thinking like, well, maybe a fringe Hall of Fame guy. I mean, statistically, he's not really even close. I was looking at JAWS, which is a baseball prospectus stat that kind of evaluates somebody's Hall of Fame case. He's like 40th on first baseman in all of Major League history. He's basically tied with Freddie Freeman. Of course, Freddie Freeman probably has 5 or 6 more years. So for people saying Freddie Freeman's not going to make the Hall of Fame, take that into account. But I guess he was a very good player, but not great player is what it feels like. But I was surprised. I had him in my head as a great player.
Yeah, no, you kind of just took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say that it's not the Hall of Very Good. It's the Hall of Fame. And to me, I'm not quite as surprised just because I kind of always viewed Adrian Gonzalez as just a really good player. Like there's years where he was an all-star. You said 5 times, I believe.
Yeah.
And there's years where he wasn't, but he probably should have been. Like he was kind of always just on that borderline. So he was a really good player. I wouldn't put him on the Hall of Fame level, but I definitely think there's something to be said about consistency in this league. And there was, a decade's time where he was putting up, all-star type numbers pretty much every year. And on top of the, the offense and the RBIs, he's also a very good defensive player, had a lot of Gold Gloves as well. So I think he was a really good player, just not, not quite at Hall of Fame level.
Totally. All right, folks. Well, let us know below. What are your favorite memories when you hear Adrian Gonzalez and think of the Dodgers? Is there a moment? Is it the trade? Let us know below. We appreciate it. That's Daniel Starkand. My name is Jeff Spiegel. As always, check out DodgerBlue.com, DodgerBlue1958 for all the latest. And please subscribe, ring the notification bell here as well. We'll see you next time.